We're here to talk about food system innovation. When we first started this conference, we talked about ag tech. And as investors, we also focus on healthcare. And the convergence of healthcare and agriculture innovation is now being discussed as food system innovation. And so we've invited you all and eager to have you participate in the conversation about how we make food improve health and life. So we spend about $1.6 trillion a year in the United States on food. We spend between $500 billion and $1 trillion on nutrition-related healthcare. So that's diabetes, cardiovascular disease. And what we're trying to concentrate now on is how do we solve these two problems at once. So as we think about the food system, there are really two food systems. System A is what we think of as big ag. It's soy, it's corn. It was first sort of conceived after World War II, productionized by the United States, and on a worldwide basis has delivered calories at scale, affordably, cheaply. But the byproduct of this over time is it has later stage life health issues. System B is one that many people in this room probably live in, and that is healthy and nutritious food. It's more expensive, it's harder to get access to, but people who live in System B go on to live wonderful lives, and whether it's Mediterranean diet or other types of diets, it's a healthier food system. But it's expensive. Now, we've seen the cost of computers come down, we've seen the cost of cars come down, the cost of refrigerators and air transportation through the last 100 years. But this food system always seems to stay high and expensive. And as innovators, we sort of wonder about that. So this is a hard chart perhaps to see. If you go to AEI on their website, you can see this. But this is a chart of inflationary and deflationary forces. So everything in the blue, things like cell phones, have come down in cost over time. Everything in red has gone up in time. Now, I have studied innovation my entire career, and the fundamental truth about innovation is it's deflationary. Innovation ultimately drives down the cost of a good. It makes it more available to more people. And so sometimes we say, oh, we're doing a lot of innovation. Healthcare has a lot of innovation. Food has a lot of work. But then the question is are we spending enough? Are we spending enough? Are we investing enough? Are we doing enough research and development? Are we backing enough entrepreneurs? And the reality is, in all elements of this chart that are red, we are not. We may be spending 3% of GDP on R&D or something like that, and people feel that that's right. But by definition, we do all the red lines in this chart should be coming down if we're investing enough. We estimate that in venture capital alone, the United States has a shortfall of about $12 billion a year of investment, and we're working on that as a firm. But it's not just about investment. The other challenge we have is that 60% of buyers will make their choice based on price alone. So we can say you should eat better, you should take better care of yourself, but the practical reality is the bulk of people make a decision based on price. So we have to have deflationary forces in the food system to drive the proper healthcare behavior. Perfect job for entrepreneurs. So the mission for all of you this week is to continue this conversation around what we call System C. System C is healthy, nutritious, tasty, and cheap. Seems like an easy thing. If that were true, if good is less costly than bad, then we should all do that. And so that's our job. And as an engineer, I think through this problem, say, well, I just need to solve for that problem. So we've invited you all here to help us solve that problem. What are the steps that we will take to drive down that cost? So I think we all know who this guy is. Anybody not who he is? He looks a little badass. He's in control and master of the universe at this point. Seems like a great entrepreneur. Has anybody ever seen this picture? This is what an entrepreneur looks like when they actually are changing the world. This afternoon and tomorrow we have the Innovation Showcase. You'll see 32 of these people in that room. And we as investors do not know which ones are going to, I have a sense of which ones are going to change the world. I'll keep that to myself. But these are the people who, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, fundamentally changed markets when nobody knew who the hell they were. We had a great conversation at breakfast with Bruce Sherman and Dave Farley about their observations through decades of paying attention to innovation, of new changes that are coming down in the biome. We were talking about radical sort of shifts in thinking that, as Dave was telling me, Bruce was telling me about aspects about how to reinvigorate the biome in babies, work that he's done for 15 years. And Dave started telling us stories about how in the Sudan, they were using the same principles 15 years ago. So we have a lot to learn about how to solve these technology problems and scale it. And part of our responsibility here is to figure out that scale. It's not so much figuring out the pure science, but leveraging the experience of everybody in the room to help us figure out how to scale it. So when we set about for this conference, we decided to sort of shape the audience. People in the room may know the answer to this. I ask it a lot. What is the one thing that every entrepreneur needs, every new business, every startup? Money? A lot of people say money. A customer. Customers give the guidance to an entrepreneur to tell them how to apply resources. They need investors, and they need experienced leaders who've been in the industry that maybe have been in the industry for 40 years and say, look, we tried these things and it didn't work, and maybe you can figure out how to do it differently. So what we said in this conference, from the first time we started it, is let's get 50 entrepreneurs, 50 customers, 50 investors, and 50 proven leaders, and stick them in the room together. We now have 300 broken down into that. And the intention is to try to drive as much networking as possible between all of you, because the 32 people working on a closet developing, or companies working in a closet developing new technology, need the input of early adopter customers, and need the input of investors, and need the input of proven experts in the field to help them figure out how to transform the technologies that will become the fundamental building blocks of what we're trying to do in terms of developing System C. So my request of you is challenge each other in terms of that networking. Spend the time while you're here getting to know the other people. Our objective is to make sure that you walk out of this conference with 20 people you didn't know before that are going to influence how you're thinking about your strategy, whether you're a customer, an investor, an entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, it's not just the technology that does it, it's leadership. And the additional leadership that needs to be included in this is also from the public sector. And so we've invited Bill Lee, Governor Bill Lee, to come down and discuss what Tennessee is doing in particular to help grow this particular ecosystem and make it a great environment in which to grow new agriculture technology.
So Morgan Dysart was finishing up her freshman year at the University of Minnesota in 2010 when she noticed her vision was getting a little blurry. She thought it was late night studying, but she decided to go to the doctor anyway. And he couldn't find anything wrong with her eyes, but he said, Morgan, you need to get a brain scan just to be safe. The scan determined a very rare form of brain cancer that was impacting her nerves. Her entire face was going numb. It was growing so rapidly that it could not be treated with radiation. Yet new technology allowed her doctor to use microsurgical techniques and remove the entire tumor. She was in the hospital 5 days. She was home in a week with no symptoms. Les Ball lost both of his arms at the shoulder when he was a teenager in a horrible accident. 2 years ago, he got a robotic arm with 26 joints. It moves with his very own thoughts. With his very own thoughts, he can curl 45 pounds. Wow. Advances in technology and medicine are allowing us to cure disease and repair broken bodies like never before. As a nation and a world, we've gotten very good at that, at improving health that has gone bad. But we aren't nearly as good at preventing it from going bad in the first place. A few statistics. 38% of adults in the United States live with obesity. 100 million people in the United States have diabetes or prediabetes. If you're low income, you're 70% more likely to have diabetes. Now, we know that diabetes is a diet-related disease, and what does that mean? It means that food is at the very root of causing it, and food can be a tool for preventing it. Heart disease. Heart disease is the leading death for all Americans in the United States among both men and women. More than 600,000 people die every year from heart disease in the United States. That's 1 in 4 deaths. Heart disease, too, is diet-related, so it means that food is at the root of preventing it. My dear friend Nancy Mitchell burned her wrist very badly taking a roasted chicken out of the oven. She was lifting out the roasting pot, and it fell onto her arm and seared the skin all the way to the bone. She was rushed to the Duke Burn Center, one of the top burn centers globally. And she's a swimmer, and really, her primary concern was, how quick can I get back in the pool? And the doctor treated her arm, and he said, look, the single most important determinant of how quickly you heal will be what you eat. Lots of vegetables, plenty of protein. So her food would determine the pace of her healing. We now know that food also determines a child's brain development. It determines whether you get diabetes, heart disease, and we now know even cancer. So we have this incredible burden of knowledge, yet it seems so very hard to respond to that burden of knowledge. Why is that? Well, we're up against a lot when we try to eat smart. It turns out that we are hardwired to crave salt and fat and sugar. And if you were one of our hunter-gatherer great ancestors who stumbled upon a honey tree, it would have served you to eat up every drop of the honey. And if you scored a kill, you would have lived longer if you ate every bite of the fat, along with the lean meat. But calories were scarce then, and people were really on the move. Sweetness came from fruit. But now, sweetness comes from donuts and ice cream and added sugar in almost everything processed. So our taste buds love salt and fat and sugar. And then you compound that with food marketing and culture, and it's really unbelievably difficult to do this by choice alone. So let's take a look at the evolution of snacking foods from the turn of the century through the Ag era and right through to the Industrial Revolution. Are you ready? Ready? Okay. 1893 comes the Cracker Jack. And in 1900, the Hershey bar. In 1912, came the Oreo and Hostess cupcakes in 1919. But up through this period, American life included so much more physical activity, and these foods really weren't very frequently consumed. They were treats in the truest sense of the word. The processed food industry didn't shift into high gear until right after World War I, when the stock market boom gave rise to new snack foods and leisure time to enjoy them. And so you see this quickening pace of innovation with sugar, sodium, and fat that produces lots of really delicious foods, but foods that aren't so great for us. Let's take a look. The 1920s gave us Eskimo pies, Girl Scout cookies, gummy bears, and my favorite, Velveeta cheese. The 30s, despite the Depression, gave us Twinkies and Fritos. The 40s were Dairy Queen, M&Ms, Cheetos, Kraft American cheese. But put on your seatbelt, folks. Here come the 50s. Dunkin' Donuts, Ore-Ida French fried potatoes, Cheese Whiz, and Pepperidge Farm cookies, Eggo waffles for breakfast, TV dinners, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Hungry yet? Refrigerated cookie dough, Ruffles, Haagen-Dazs. These are many of my childhood favorites, I have to say, so I hope I'm not in trouble. But I'd like to point out this is really nobody's fault. Certainly not the food industry's fault. American food companies gave us exactly what we asked for. We wanted quick, convenient, tasty foods at low prices, and we got them. But in demanding those and receiving those without attention to how salt and fat and sugar impact our health, these foods we love so much gave rise to diabetes and heart disease. So why am I talking about all this? Because we are in the midst of another great transformation from the industrial era to the digital era. The coming digital age that we think we understand is so much bigger than I think even we in this room appreciate. Now, I know some of you have got to be thinking, who doesn't get that the digital revolution is here and is big? But Anne Marie Slaughter got my attention a couple months ago. We were together and she said that the coming digital revolution, not the one that has already occurred, but the coming digital revolution will be even more disruptive than the Industrial Revolution. So we're in the midst of this dynamic moment, revolution really, as the governor was referencing, and changes will no doubt come, as big as the cotton gin, as big as the steam engine. And as with every transformation in human history, along with the new possibilities come consequences, some intended and some maybe not. Capitalism drives really hard and fast. And as this situation unfolds, though, we're really in a different position because we are aware of the power of food and physical activity to build or destroy our health. So I know you in this room are coming at this from different angles. Many of you are in ag, many in tech. There are entrepreneurs and innovators, some folks from consumer packaged goods companies. But I really challenge you, wherever you sit, do not go into this next decade of change without asking what we can do to keep the connection between food and health front and center as we innovate. It's such a welcome thing to have agriculture joining this effort, and I think we've really got to be collaborative. It's got to be ag, tech, medical, civil society, as the governor was saying, nonprofit, for-profit. But I think the biggest thing we can do is to be intentional. As we learned the last time around, it is oh so very difficult to come back and correct unintended consequences later. So let's be intentional now. Thank you.
I want to start with a very personal story, right? It was about 5 years ago. I was 70 pounds heavier, and I could barely bend down to do my shoelaces. And so I had a health scare, and I went to the doctor. And that's the picture of what doctor and their office gave me. It was a green paper and a red paper, and they told me that there is some issue with your gut that we can't necessarily discern what it is. So we're going to give you these 2 sheets. We're going to put you on a low FODMAP diet, and we want you to go home and try this. We came home. I looked at that, and then they told me you should try and eat high fiber food. The flip side of that is everything that was high fiber was on the red side of the chart, like apples and pears was on the red side of the chart. So I was left with these 2 sheets. Then I add to that I'm a vegetarian. I have to supposed to be on high fiber diet. We're an Indian family, so then there is whole issue of translating this into Indian food. And then I was going over my weight loss, and by the way, here was the kicker. They said, don't switch over to a new diet very rapidly. You need to gradually switch over. And at this point, I left. And look, I know enough to Google, I know enough to do apps, and I know enough to do things, but I was just left completely perplexed on what should I really be eating. And what started was like a 2-year painful journey, and the one good out of it is I'm 60 pounds lighter, I exercise more. There's a lot of good things came out of it, but the journey gave me a stark realization that this is a nightmare that a lot of people go through on a daily basis, right? Fast forward, I had the opportunity to work on what we believe is a truly disruptive future for the food called MilHero, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And before I launch into MilHero, I'm going to go to a slightly lighter side. And one of the things that we increasingly noticed is consumers are seeking personalized experiences. And there are 2 anecdotes that kind of bring this to life. About 10 years ago, me and my colleague were at a Starbucks at Washington, D.C., and we were very regulars. I used to do consulting, so we were very regulars to the Starbucks. And his order was, and I still remember it, it was half cup quad shot venti cappuccino with an extra shot of something, 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 right? And I only drank latte. He was more picture perfect than I, so for some reason, all the college kids behind the counter remembered his order than me. It was the ugly friend syndrome. But besides the point, right, I think there was something fascinating going on in that moment. This gentleman who I was with had figured out how to personalize his coffee to his taste, right? And myself, from that journey to today, I have figured out what I need to drink to stay healthy. So we all have our way of beginning to personalize. And about a week and a half ago, I was taking my son to library, and I told him, why do we need to lug around our laptop? He's got his own laptop, and we've created his own username and password and stuff like that. And I said, you can just use the library computer. And his response to me was, Daddy, I had to go there, log in, and spend all this time trying to get all my links on Chrome browser showing up. And by the way, he's 6 years old. So I looked at it and I said, this brought the entire thing whole cycle, right? I'm talking about 10 years ago when it was all about figuring out what your taste profile was. Then I also shared with you a story of what my health profile was and how I had to personalize for the sake of it. And then you've got my 6-year-old. For him, personalization is done. It's native, right? So there are many facets to that personalization, as I shared. There's convenience aspect of it. There's lifestyle aspect of it, likes, dislikes, health, wellness, budget. There's just a whole slew of it. And so when we started thinking about this in terms of how it impacts our consumers or the people that we serve for on every day, we started with meal planners. And the reason why we started with meal planners is they usually seem to care for what the family begins to eat. And this is a typical journey of what happens on a Saturday or a Sunday in every homes that cook at home, right? So first and foremost, we create a meal plan. Then we begin to personalize for other things, right? Like your ethnicity, your things that you're going to do. You may have a guest at home and their preferences, what your kid likes or doesn't like. Then you check your pantry, and let's all be honest, right? Our pantries are really not optimized for efficiency. They're optimized for storage. You just dump things in there, and seldom we know what's in the pantry. Then you collect coupons, check your budget, and then you shop at 1+ stores. And that's how I feel like, because I own the responsibility of shopping in the stores, and so I get to pick up avocados in one place, tomatoes in one place, and then other shelf stable in a different place. That's as per my orders from my wife. So it's basically how people shop. And then after you do all that, you manage for your mood, your lifestyle. There's just so many things that go into it. Then you cook and clean, and you get to eat. When you add that entire cycle, people spend approximately 500 hours per year just doing this. And it occurs once or twice a week, and it is still a very unfulfilling activity because it is multidimensional. It is so multidimensional that our minds cannot just necessarily calculate all that. So we learned a few things, that home chefs and millennial moms are our primary audience. People use 2+ apps. But yet, unfulfilling prophecy. People end up cooking go-to meals, the same things, every once or twice, and they have extreme aversion. When you build a system, they have extreme aversion to any changes, to like handing off to a new system or handing off to a new platform. They have extreme aversion to all that. And fundamentally, personalized meal planning with seamless connection to commerce became the unlock for us. That's what we learned. With that being said, we came up with the concept of MilHero, and our vision is to be the best digitally powered meal planning solution. And in a way, you guys are going to be some of the first previewers of our meal planning solution. It's been in the market. We've been doing more of a stealth test. You can download this in the App Store now. The concept is very simple. Can people go in and personalize their preferences, what they like, dislike, in a more Tinderesque fashion, as you see there? And then can we come up with a meal plan that is so targeted to them that they don't have to do anything more? And once they've come up with the meal plan, can we just make sure it is shopped at their favorite store? And to build something like this, right, there are lots of apps in the store, but to build something like this, we had to rely on food intelligence. And so what's food intelligence? Food intelligence is our 3-year journey of research and bringing together artificial intelligence and food science. So the way we think about it is you brought together the data science and the food science to build this sophisticated system. It's got its intelligence from 11 million recipes, 700,000+ grocery items, and a lot other details around cooking semantics. And we've applied natural language processing and other sophisticated algorithms to simply break down everything that somebody would need in their plan. So things like, how much does it take to cook something at home? How is the food image appealing or not? Because guess what? We all live in an Instagram generation where you post food on Instagram before you actually pray. So there's just a whole slew of things that we have built. The system can even understand substitutions. It can understand ingredient recommendations. It can understand recipe similarities. And so this sophisticated journey of 3 years that just happened in the back end needed to be brought to forefront, and we're doing that with MilHero. Again, you guys are probably some of the first to preview this, and you should be able to download this in the App Store. But what does being a personal meal planning mean, right? We started with convenience and preferences as the first choice, but we have full view to go into other areas like lifestyle. I'm going to run a triathlon. What do I need to eat and how do I train myself? All the way to health, right? I have a specific a disease state, and how am I going to manage that? Why now, right? We truly believe that technology, this is how technology disrupts, and we're at an exciting time, right? Technology starts by disaggregating the value chain. What I mean by that is, if you take a look at the cable industry, or if you take a look at the newspaper industry, right, it was all designed around a retail-centric value chain, right? How fast I can get a food on the shelf, does it fit the shelf, is it colorful enough to attract people, so on and so forth. But now, we actually can directly reach the consumers. Then, that leads to emergence of niche brands, right? Brands that are hyper-focused on a specific need state for a consumer. Then you begin to see newer franchises and commoditization of all of these food products begin to happen. And it's all driven by trends for data and aggregation. And last but not the least comes personalization of food. It all starts and happening in some sequence, but the most important thing is one thing begins to feed the other, and other things begin to layer up on top of it, like logistics, IoT, ad tech, machine learning, smart kitchen. You take a specific tech industry jargon or a tech that goes after it, it all begins to then attack this problem of how to simplify the entire food ecosystem. We believe that we're truly at that pivotal moment where all of these are coming together and that flywheel is beginning to get created. And you can see this in the rapid advances in the food ecosystem, right? Everything from, and I think the entire value chain to some extent is here, from ag all the way through food. We're here. We also had folks speak about consumer preferences before. And we have health here. And then you can begin to see science, lifestyle, diets, tech. But out of all this also comes a lot of noise on what is good, what is bad, is this good? I mean, I ride the elevator to 80 floors every single day, and the little thing on top, one day I see caffeine is good for you, the other day I see caffeine is bad for you, one day I see wine is going to help you live longer, the other day I see wine is going to kill you faster. So there's just a lot of noise around it. But if you take all of that noises out, what is most exciting is there is a rapid advance in the food ecosystem happening. But with that advance, this is how we sometimes feel. This was my feeling when I went to the doctor, and the doctor gave me a bunch of sheets and said, go figure it out. And this is probably my wife's feeling and my feeling when my son dishes out at a dish we made, and he gives it a thumbs down after we have a meal, right? So from time to time, our feelings, we all need a hero, and for us, we look forward to being your meal hero, actually. That's really that we are after, and we believe that this is the true disruption of food that brings together the entire ecosystem, but most importantly, personalizes it for every consumer that's out there. Thank you.